Speed. It's probably the single most defining concept in a man's recreation. Few feelings of pride are ever generated from modesty and moderation. Since the days of horses as transportation, having the fastest horse has always neatly translated into having the biggest wiener.
Great job, wieners!
Fortunately for many of us, that strange form of black magic has endured through the ages. It's why we have 190 horsepower side-by-sides, 200 horsepower motorcycles, and we put rocket ships on water. Nothing portrays how well endowed you are like having the fastest chariot. You don't ever have to push the limits or test the limits of the machine's capability for bragging rights. Simply knowing, and telling everybody you meet just how fast your ride could be if you wanted to get on it, will also indirectly let them know just how big that middle leg is. ATVs are no exception to this rule. Ever hear of a 100 horsepower Banshee, or see a comment from a kid asking why manufacturers don't put turbos on 4x4 ATVs? Just imagine the hog that poor kid is brewing.
Big hot dog!
So, for that reason, today's video is on the fastest ATVs currently available on the market, and most important, which conditions they excel in above all others. Fast is a relative concept in the ATV world, and speed claims and drag races have a way of driving you crazy because when you're off-road, where ATVs are intended to be, the rider's ability has much more to do with being fast than the actual ATV does. A skilled dude on a 420 Rancher has the potential to be faster, much faster, than the average Joe on a Renegade. Of course, straight smooth sections will be different, but throw in some legitimate obstacles where there's technique required, and terrain is the great equalizer to an ATV's speed. Two-stroke guys are obviously going to have some things to say about this, and two-stroke should obviously have a place in this argument. There's going to be commenters talking about Banshee prowess, and yes, Banshees are bad-to-the-bone little drag racers. If you're here because you want to drag race ATVs on pavement, never turn right or left, or get on a trail, go with a she-devil, or even rarer, a little unicorn in the Quadzilla. Port it, pipe it, jet it, probably stretch it, and you'll have bragging rights for days. But you'll be stuck on the road when your buddies dip off into the trail, and at that point, you might as well have gotten a turbo booster to hoon around. Four-stroke machines have better, more consistent power across the RPM range, and ATV steering geometry has definitely improved after the 1980s. So once you leave the flat drag strip, the four-stroker will make most people faster. But none of that is why we're here today. Today we're talking about the machines that you can still actually buy on the market, not discontinued machines that cost well over their original MSRP on Marketplace. So for that, there's really only so many places to look. In today's market, if you want the fastest machines, there's three directions you can go. And obviously that's Yamaha, CanAm, and as much as it pains me to say it, and I'll explain why later, Polaris. Also, keep in mind that safety regulations have ATVs factory limited in speed, and this is a showroom floor comparison, so those restrictions factor into these considerations, and the aftermarket can absolutely change everything. We acknowledge that. Starting with Yamaha, the Raptor 700 and the YFZ450 are the only pure sport ATVs left on the market, and are certainly two of the fastest. Off the line, the Raptor 700 tends to pull on the weaker low end of the YFZ450. But there's a reason why the YFZ450 is king of the motocross and cross-country tracks, and that's its weight, stability, and aggressive capabilities. The higher revving, racier 450 engine in the YFZ allows a skilled rider to pull out of corners and attack jumps and obstacles more quickly. The YFZ450's aggressive ergonomics, weight, and agility lend themselves to a faster mid-range with the right rider, making the YFZ faster in many situations. The Raptor's torque and low end allow it to pull the YFZ450 off the line, and the narrow width makes the Raptor really good in tight trails, but it's heavier and less agile than the YFZ450. The Raptor's ergonomics are much more relaxed than the YFZ2. That makes the Raptor much more comfortable for long rides, but staying laser focused and hyper aggressive is mentally easier on a YFZ. That's if your body can keep up. Top speed of the Raptor and YFZ in stock trim is very similar, topping out in the low 70s depending on a variety of conditions. Top speeds at or below 75 miles an hour means the remaining ATVs on this list are going to top both of Yamaha's pure sport offerings, at least in stock trim. CanAm has the highest horsepower ATVs on the market, with the 1000cc Renegade and Outlander coming in at 91 horsepower. These machines are virtually the same except for the racks and bodywork, but we'll say for the sake of argument that the Renegade is faster because it's a little lighter, although I will say the Terracross tires on the Outlander are going to hook better than the sport tires on the Renegade, which could absolutely change things in a lot of conditions. CanAm's clutching is pretty aggressive from the factory, and the Rotex engine pulls hard. Combine that with a fairly short wheelbase, and it can make it difficult to keep the front end planted on takeoff for either machine. Still, off the line, we'd say the CanAms are the punchiest of the 4x4s, and the Raptor may be close on takeoff, but a Renegade should have a little more juice all the way up to the top end. Again, not considering aftermarket upgrades. We've found the CanAms to be faster than Polaris's 1000cc offerings in drag races, mainly due to the clutching, and provided the rider can keep the front end of the CanAm planted. The steering on the CanAms is also a little stiffer, which gives the rider more confidence as speed increases, with the trade-off being a little more arm pump over time. In a racing environment, CanAm's Renegade has dominated, even causing the death of the 1000cc standard width Scrambler from Polaris. This can mean that pro for pro, more guys were faster on the Renegade than the Scrambler, and that can certainly be true. But more often than not, what you'll hear from the racers is that the Polaris Scrambler just couldn't hold up as well to the abuse of racing. There's still a few of them out there, Scramblers I mean. Austin Parks from Spider Graphics and friend of the channel still races a pretty sweet Scrambler because he prefers the ergonomics and handling of the Polaris. Both points which I personally agree with. But Austin is also a skilled ATV builder who knows how to strengthen the weak points of the Scrambler. Sticking with the Scrambler, shortly after the standard width 1000cc Scrambler was discontinued, the 55-inch wide Scrambler 1000S was born, which is an entirely different flavor of ATV. We tested one for most of last year with ATV On Demand, which is where a lot of the content for this video is coming from, and we were actually surprised at how well it performed in drag race head-to-heads with other 1000cc ATVs we had at the time. The Scrambler can actually make this list for two reasons. One is that when drag racing it, its weight and wheelbase are actually advantages in pulling off the line. It's easier to keep the front end down, and the weight translates into initial traction that helps get the machine going. Still, it wasn't the fastest on the drag strip. Polaris's stock clutching is pretty mild, probably for the sake of its intended demographic. But where the Scrambler S really excelled is in extremely rough and choppy trails. The Scrambler 1000S's width, ground clearance, and suspension travel allowed us to go much faster over rough trails than we could with any other machine. We barely realized it at the time when mounted on the Scrambler, but switching machines made it obvious that the Scrambler S is much faster than anything else when the trails are really tore up. This, in our opinion, makes it a good ATV for folks who typically ride with side-by-sides, but our concerns would be consistent with the reasons why the previous Scrambler ultimately failed on the XC track, and that's the long-term rigidity. But the capability certainly gives the Scrambler S an advantage over its predecessor, and if you're looking to shred on wide, rough trails with your steering wheel bound buddies, the Scrambler S might be right for you. So to wrap this up, going fast on an ATV is about having the right machine for the conditions you're going to encounter. Two-wheel drive, solid axle sport ATVs in general are going to be much faster on everything but the worst trails. That's part of the reason why the Dirt Obsession guys switched to sport quads after riding every 4x4 on the market. CanAm's Outlander and Renegade are the fastest ATVs out of the box, and the Polaris Scrambler XP1000S is the fastest AT we've ever been on when the trails get really chewed up. Be sure to check out ATV On Demand for individual test videos of all these machines, and subscribe to Dirt Obsession for more content like this. We'll see you next time.